Hey, and welcome back to another video. In this video, we're going to look at Twinmotion imports and those specific settings. Now, I will say I've done a video in the past, it was probably much longer than this one will be, on all of the import options that we have for Twinmotion. Of course, that was as of a couple years ago, but now we have a little bit more to work with. But specifically what this video is going to look at is importing from Revit, and not so much the import as a direct link. I use import because it is an import in a way. So using the direct link. So what are the settings? What do they do? What do you really need to pay attention to? How do they work? And what's really most important? So if at any point in this video you happen to learn something, please demolish that like button. That really helps me out quite a lot. Also consider subscribing, that does too. Again, I will say, made a video on this in the past. I'd highly recommend that you check that out first, because that was going to cover a lot more than what we cover here, and it was also covering a lot more than just the direct link. So, okay, here we are, and this is Twinmotion. We know what that is. I do want to show you what we're working with in Revit, and we looked at this project before. It's a very intensive project. There's a lot going on here, and so I don't want you to don't want you to worry about that, because we don't care what this is. We just know we're going to bring it in. So how do we do that? Well, we can come in here to import, and there's obviously geometry, direct link, landscape, and point cloud. We don't care about geometry in a sense that, well, you could, but I don't want to bring just a basic FBX in. I don't want to have to worry about that. I want to have this direct link working for me specifically through Datasmith, because it's going to bring all the data in correctly, the way I want, organized correctly, and obviously the way I want to. Landscape, this is not specifically a landscape. It has some landscape, but it is not just a landscape file, and also it's not a point cloud. This is an actual 3D Revit model. So again, I'm going to come over here to direct link. You can see here that my direct link setting source is pointing to all of the open Revit files that I have open on my computer. And as of right now, I only have the one, which is this one. And it's going to be that same one. Now, I want to draw your attention up here to Datasmith. And this is where all the magic is happening here. We can see that I have synchronized connections, export Datasmith file, and then Datasmith messages. Don't need to worry about the messages. They won't appear. But then I can look at connections, and this is where we're going to see our connection, whether we have one or not. As of right now, nothing is found. We have no connection established yet. We will see the connection from Twinmotion to here once we end up choosing that specific Revit model. So at this point, we don't need to worry about this. And then ultimately we'll synchronize when we're ready. So again, let's go back to Twinmotion, and I can see here, yep, that's the Revit model I want. And then what we care about, the bulk of this video, will be from these expanded options. There's a lot here. And just know that this is probably the way you're going to want to keep it, but we're going to cover all of this to the minimal degree that you need to know when it comes to understanding this and using it for your specific Revit model. Okay, so collapse. This is the most important. Of course, you need to choose the specific Revit file, but collapse, it has everything to do with how the import will come into your Twinmotion model, how it will perform, and what you can expect. So the first option is keep hierarchy. So what does that mean? Well, the keep hierarchy, all that means is we don't need to break out what keep hierarchy actually means, but the result will be that the hierarchy of models and the organization of models and elements that you have within Revit will be maintained the exact same way as it is in Revit, but also in Twinmotion, if you choose to collapse this by keeping the hierarchy. Collapse is just how the folders will be organized through collapsing, or that type of thing. So just know that. The next option, I would say the next two options I have used once or twice, and it is usually for very specific instances. And this one is collapse by material. So this is exactly what it sounds like. Every material that you have in your Revit project is going to obviously look different depending on the settings you have the material, but every object will have some sort of a material, whether it's default or not. And whether it's default or not doesn't matter, but just know that the collapse of all of your Revit models and all the models coming into your Twinmotion file will be collapsed and organized by material. So if you have one material applied to your entire model, which is unlikely, but if you do, that model will come in as one single object. I don't like this because, let's take for example, I have a series of curtain walls, and it's likely that you're going to have one or probably just one main mullion material, and it's going to be a metal, and it's going to be a color or whatever. You might have a few throughout your project, but let's say you have one. Well, everywhere you have that material for curtain wall mullions, that will serve as one object. It will select as one object. Do I want that? No. Maybe you do. It's perfectly fine if you want that. I don't want that usually because I don't care about hiding all my mullions by material. Like that doesn't apply to me. Now you might say, well, what if I want to update the material, change the material? Well, I always change materials. I will never use a Revit material. I don't like them, and the way they are currently brought into Twinmotion, they're not that great. They look just as bad as they do in Revit. So I'm going to want to use all the nice looking Twinmotion or Quixel materials to override all my model elements from Revit. So with that said, how would you end up replacing those materials? Well, whether you have this collapsed by material or not, you can replace the materials by material, which is awesome. Then that's totally great. That's really the appeal of Twinmotion. I can, regardless of how I bring in my model, I can replace all the materials that I want. Basically, if I replace that material for the mullions that we were just talking about with a different color or different metal or whatever, it's going to overwrite that everywhere, regardless of whether I've chosen to collapse it by material or to keep the hierarchy. Okay, pretty simple stuff. It's just a matter of organizing. Just imagine a collapsing is organizing. Then finally, we have collapse all. This is pretty self-explanatory, but if I choose to collapse all, no matter how many billions of objects I might have in my Revit model, or really any model I'm bringing in for that matter, everything will be one model. It will come in as one single model that I can select and move around and manipulate only as one single model. Now, I've probably done this once, and the only reason I've done this is it was a specific link, a consultant's link, and I didn't want to have to deal with all of those individual parts. It's just not necessary. Plus, I did actually want them to all appear to be one color and just like look the same, like all the pipes, duct, and electrical, all that is one color because it's from one model. Same with the structure. I did that with a different structural model. So that's fine. Do it however you want. But that's the only time I've ever used this collapsing method because I don't like it. I don't want to have everything come in as one model. I need more control. And so basically, if you want more control, which I'm not saying I'm a control freak, but when it comes to Twinmotion, you kind of have to be a control freak. Collapse all, I want to make that keep hierarchy. And so I'm going to import this in just a second. We can see what the collapse actually does whenever we keep the hierarchy, because that's really important. So moving on down, we have max UV precision. So it's going to be hard to tell what this is doing, to be honest. We have struggled with UV, basically how materials are applied over an object. Like you've heard of UV wrapping, how this material wraps around an object. We've struggled with that with Revit because it's not so great. But Unreal Engine has some wonderful tools that allow you to basically redo the UVs and allow those materials to be placed onto an object at a higher quality, much better, more efficient, all that, whatever. We don't care about that so much in Twinmotion because that is not, we don't have that available to us, but we do have this, and it's max UV precision. So what does this really mean? Well, it's basically going to make your material application on objects a little more precise, hence max UV precision. Now, would I ever worry about this? No. Would I ever bother on checking this? No. Would I ever go to the trouble of testing whether this improves materials or not? Not really, because I've done it once or twice and it doesn't. It's really not worth sharing. So I would always max UV precision unless your model is absolutely absurd, giant, huge, and you have tons of materials, and I still wouldn't worry about it. 99% of the time, max UV precision. Check it. And then process. These are a couple of the newer options that we have with direct link imports as of 2022, which is cool. So process, we can choose all, and then we can choose meshes or lights. And so I'm going to make a separate video in the future about importing lights specifically because that is giant. It's new. It's really nice, but we're not focused on this. Now, what is the process when it comes to the actual process? What does this mean? Well, if I choose all, I'm just going to import everything, like Revit. Everything in Revit is going to come in no matter what. And that includes meshes and lights. So what is the definition of meshes are? You might have an idea of what meshes are, but meshes are just simply objects, like physical objects that you have modeled in your model. They're just model elements. So do I want to bring all those in? Probably. And then finally, lights. Do I want to just bring the lights in? So you can make the case for, actually I want to import just the meshes, and then I want to come back later and import all the lights. That's what I will do probably starting out, just based on the performance of Twinmotion's lights and, replacing the Revit lights, things like that. I would probably go that route, but for the sake of this video, I'm going to choose all. Just kind of know what it's doing. That's kind of the whole point of this video. What is this doing? Well, this is importing everything. This is importing just my model elements, and this is importing just the lights. Simple. And then finally here we have light settings. So again, this is playing off the lights. This will not factor in at all if you just choose meshes. Like, it won't matter because there won't be any lights coming in. So just know that, of course. But if I choose all, the light settings will absolutely matter. And so we have use original. And so use original is saying, well, I'm going to take the original settings for that light, the wattage, lumens, whatever, from my Revit model. In this case, Revit model, whatever model you're coming from, but in this case, Revit. And I want to take that and just apply it directly one-to-one the way it is in Revit, and then apply the same settings, light, output, and everything in Twinmotion. Do that. That's great. I like that. But if you've ever messed with Revit lights for more than 5 minutes and you've changed the wattage and looked at the effects in renderings that actually read the intensity of the light that way, you know that this is probably not the best route to go. And so the other options are good. Now, if you're dead intent on, this is a 50-watt light, and it's going to be 50 watts, it's going to look this way, and I'm 100% sure because I work with lights 24/7, then yeah, use your original. You probably modeled it right in Revit, and you're good to go. But if you're like me, I'm an architect, I'm not a lighting consultant, I don't live and breathe lights, then set intensity to 300 lumens is a great start. So what is this going to do? Well, it's just going to set every single light that's imported from Revit into Twinmotion and set it to 300 lumens. Now that is going to be that's way too bright for probably most of your lights, especially if they're in a small room, intimate setting. You're going to have to go and override that. Now, that is much less of a pain than having to deal with lights that are kind of varying intensities all over the place, blowing out this room and that and whatever. Just kind of knowing that they're all 300 lumens. Boom. I can go change it as I need to per space, per light. Not a big deal. And then this is the other one. This is kind of the big wild card. I don't know if I like this yet or not, but it is set all values to Twinmotion default. The default is going to depend on the type of light that it replaces your Revit light with Twinmotion. So this is kind of this is going to be a case-by-case basis, and I would say for you, you can make your decision whether you want to set the intensity at 300 lumens or if you want to set all values to Twinmotion default. That's kind of up to you. In a lot of instances, the default will be good, or let's say better, but I'm less likely to want to use this because it's not consistent, and I don't know what the output of one light is versus another necessarily. That's the type of thing where it's like, I just don't know. And so I want a little more control. So I'm going to set my intensity to 300 lumens just across the board and know, yep, they're all 300. And if I need to change it, I know where they are at least. So that's very good to know. And then finally, enable substitution. This is going to apply directly to this substitution table. So first of all, what is that? Well, it is a CSV file or an Excel file, a spreadsheet file that is going to basically take all of your Revit materials and say, okay, well, this material, no matter what object is on, is going to be substituted with this Twinmotion material. In theory and on paper and on spreadsheets, it's pretty cool. It makes sense. And it would be really easy to not have to worry about replacing materials yourself and basically having this CSV file do it for you. Now, we're not going to do that right now. There's a lot that goes into that, and it can be kind of complicated. So we'll save that for a future video. Hopefully I'll get around to that because it would be a great way of saving time when applying materials correctly. But we're not going to worry about that. So I'm not going to enable this. I don't want to enable it, or else you'll probably lose the materials that you want in certain associations, because I don't know what the default substitution table is set up to do as far as replacing materials or not. So we're just going to leave that unchecked. So simply import. And as soon as I press import, nothing will happen. But let's go back to Revit and we can see what happened over here. Well, nothing. Well, we can see nothing happened. But when I click on connection, huzzah, look at this. I can see the destination is Twinmotion and the source is this Revit model. Ta-da. Very easy. Again, nothing we need to worry about here because it is just saying, hey, you have a connection. Congratulations. So all the magic really happens whenever we press synchronize. So I hope this works. It's a very large model, but I will see you on the other side regardless. All right, and we can see that we're back in Twinmotion, and we can see this direct link is actually processing everything. It really didn't take that long, maybe a minute, not too bad at all. But we can see that it is processing, and as soon as we do this, we're going to have a lot to look at because we're going to have the whole model in here, and it's going to bring in your Revit materials, whether you like that or not. It's up to you. It's just going to bring it in. That's not a big deal. But okay, so we can see it's way over there. So how do we get over there? Well, I can select anything here, and let's just go ahead and select this random roof and press F. It's going to take me to that object. So we're in the middle of everything here. Let's get out of here. This is a bit of a mess. And okay, here we go. So we successfully brought everything in, and it looks really good, apart from some of the water, but it's very easy to fix. So first of all, I'm going to unexpand my scene graph. So here's my scene graph, everything at the right here. When I do expand this, we can see this is it's basically a mess. And I will say I'm not a big fan of the way it's brought in like this, but this is the result when we keep the hierarchy. Basically, we have control of every single object. I can click this wall. I can just move this wall specifically, just that wall. I can rotate the wall. I can do everything with these objects like by themselves. I don't have to do anything else because they're all individual objects. I can do whatever I need to do. Now, the cool thing also, now, of course, I mentioned these are all separate objects and I can move them all individually. But what happens whenever I want to change the material? So this is going to be a nice looking glass facade that wraps all the way around. And we can see I don't like this material. It doesn't look that natural. It's a little over frosted. But I can select this object. And even if I hide this object, it's literally by object, which is awesome. But I'm going to select the material and I can see, well, I don't like that. It's just a lousy default material. Let's come over here to, of course, materials and then glass. And let's put this as a two-sided glass. And then boom, that everywhere that is now a two-sided glass, which is wonderful. But cool thing is I also have the option of selecting that single object and then hiding it, deleting it, moving it, whatever. I still have that full control, which is fantastic. That's the whole point. Now, how would we begin to organize this a little more? Well, there's not a whole lot we can do. We can right click and we can collapse hierarchy. And of course, we'll collapse it all the way down. And then we can see, hey, look, yep, there is my model, like just the whole model. And then I can see, yeah, they're at least organized into collapsed folders. So this is a bit of it's better. It's a little better because you can see this compared to having them all expanded into every single individual object is a little overwhelming, if I'm being honest. And then the cool thing here is that, yeah, I've got, if I hide this here, we can see, yep, they're all my lights, my Twinmotion lights, which is awesome. And where are all these lights? Well, they're amongst all of the mess, which is totally fine. That's not really what I'm worried about, but I can see that they came in. And if we just were to select one, let's go ahead and hide all this again. If we were to select one just to see, would you look at that? 300 lumens. Let's select another one. Hey, 300 lumens. Totally love it. I would experiment if I were you with the different ways of importing, whether it's collapsing my material or collapsing all, if you for some reason want to do either of those, but just mess with how the lights are brought in. And we can make another video on that in the future because that's really important. I definitely will on lights specifically, but yeah, test it out yourself. You're going to get an idea of what to expect. Now, while this is definitely not a pretty looking model the way it is and the way it's brought in from Revit, it's at least the model. I have a great place, and assuming I've applied all the materials in Revit the way I should for documentation as well as for rendering purposes, it should be really easy to replace them all. As you can see with that curtain wall, really easy to replace it. So that will do for this video. We looked at all the different import options. Of course, I can come back here and decide, well, do I want to look at the direct link settings? I can actually change this on the fly. So I can re-import this and collapse it by material. Do I want to do that? No. But for the sake of this, I'll show you what it does while we end the video. But I have a lot more options that come with the actual model itself. I can do things like re-import something that's deleted based on the fact that it has a connection to the model. I can all kinds of settings like that, and options that extend far beyond just the fact that I can import it and then that's it. Making a change in Revit, I can resynchronize and that change will be made in the Twinmotion model right here. So again, I would recommend that you looked at the video that I've done in the past because you'll be able to see all the different options that we have here. I'll show you what those are in just a second, but this direct link is now being reprocessed and resynchronized back in, but collapsed by material. And you can even do this on the fly. Now, I wouldn't recommend doing it necessarily because you might lose some associations. I just wouldn't bother with that because you're going down a dark path potentially based on what you'll get. But I do want to show you the result because it's very different and it's totally fine the way it works. It's just a matter of what to expect. And that's the whole point of this video. Are you going to get what you expect, and are you able to use what you expect? So looking at this by material, if I select this, like the object glass, basically that glass, if I inspect this glass, we can see, yep, object glass cleared. I'm going to then actually select that. And there it is. If I hide this, all of it is gone. Like it's all hidden because it's all by material. Now, why would you want to do this? I don't know. Like there's a time and a place, but it's very rare in my opinion. So the last thing I did want to show is that all these other options, direct link settings, select all imported objects, that's cool. But all these different resets and re-imports, I have another video that I've done in the past. I would definitely go check that out because it will tell you what all this does. And I believe this was sometime last year that this came out. We had all these different options when it comes to direct link settings, which is really important. I don't use these a ton because I'm usually happy with my import and I'm usually not deleting things left and right and needing to re-import them. But nonetheless, there are a lot of options that we can work with here now that we have it directly linked. So cool. That will do it for this video. If you happen to learn something, please demolish that like button. It sure helps me out quite a lot. Also consider subscribing. That does as well. I will see you in the next video. Have a wonderful day and thank you very much for watching.